coverage on KCB Group with a target price of 43.55 and an upside of 51%, and we recommend a hold. Looking at the highlights of 2016, we picked out two major highlights, and that is the Kenya Banking Act, which was amended to introduce a cap on the interest rates. We also saw that there was a rights issue that was cancelled, and a debt of $75 million was acquired from the IFC. Moving on, we look at the business description. KCB Group dates back from 1896 and has since become the largest banking group in East and Central Africa by an asset base of 595 billion Kenyan shillings. KCB has then spread its wings throughout the East African community member states and now covers over 10 million customers, and this is through 260 branches, 11,948 agencies, and 962 ATMs. Looking at the revenue, we see that KCB Kenya contributes 86%, which is the highest contribution towards the revenue, with Burundi trailing with 1%. It's important to note that, as you see from the graph, KCB's revenue has been increasing at a 7-year CAGR of 15.3%. Looking at the product performance, we see that the mobile is performing highly, and we see that the branch transactions are declining by 4% as the mobile transactions increase by 5%. Looking at the strategies, we see that KCB has strategies like increased customer satisfaction, which can be seen by the customer retention increasing by 10% from 89% to 99%. This strategic plan runs for 5 years. Then there's the robust IT platform, which has been enhanced, and this is the T24R14 customized system. It has been enhanced to now cover over 30 million customers. I'll now hand over to Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. Looking at KCB's industry and competitive overview, the group operates in a region whose competition is rated at 0.16, and the share of population with bank accounts is 13.7%. This is quite low compared to other African regional blocks. We also looked at KCB's operating environment, where we find that using the portals 5 forces, the barriers to entry are high, threats of subsidies are moderate, bargaining power of consumers is low, intensity of competition is high, and the bargaining power of suppliers is moderate. We also looked at the operating environment of KCB, the macroeconomic environment, where we find that GDP rate is expected to grow at 6%, the inflation rate is expected to grow at 6.7%, and the interest rates are expected at 8.5% on average. We also carried out an internal outlook of KCB, where we find that it has strengths such as presence in all East African countries, a strong brand name, with weaknesses such as high cost of operation and large NPLs, opportunities being the large tourism sector and the emerging young population, whereas its threats are the interest cap implications, the strong competition, and cyber attacks. Assessing KCB in line with its peers, we find that with a price of 37.5 Kenyan shillings, KCB leverages 6.55 EPS and 2 Kenyan shillings DPS, but it trails at 26% NFI. The group also has a high cost to income ratio of 48.4%, NPL ratio of 8.5%, and net interest margin of 9.1%. We therefore conclude that KCB presents quality, innovation, customer satisfaction, and efficiency to the market against its competitors. Richard?
Thank you, Andrew. Looking at financial analysis and key ratios for KCB, in 2015, total assets grew by 13.9%, with a 5-year CAGR of 11.9%. And going forward, we anticipate a 15.4% growth, driven by 14.8% growth in net loans and a 14.6% growth in customer deposits. KCB has been struggling with high NPLs, and in 2015 alone, KCB's NPLs increased by 27.5%. However, in a bid to counteract these high NPLs, KCB has also increased its loan loss provision. And in 2015 alone, KCB increased its loan loss provision by 20.2%. And KCB is trying to comply with the CBK requirements to increase the loan loss provision. KCB is also highly capitalized with a market capitalization of 162 billion shillings. We further conducted an analysis on KCB's loan book as we considered it very fundamental to our analysis. And we found out that in terms of sector contribution, personal loans account for over 33% of KCB's total loan book, with real estate coming in second at a 17% contribution and the manufacturing industry at a 12% contribution. However, these high contributions are further reflected in their contribution to NPLs. Now, personal loans account for over 21% of KCB's total NPLs, with the building and construction industry contributing a 19% and real estate falling in third at 15% contribution. Now, in terms of segment contribution, KCB is doing well in the corporate segment, however, is still struggling in the SME segment. Looking at KCB's deposits, KCB's deposits grew by 12.5% in 2015, and a 14.6% growth is anticipated going forward. KCB's demand deposits account for over 60% of their total deposits, with customer deposits accounting for over 89% of KCB's total liabilities. Now, this leaves KCB and puts it in a better position to lend. KCB's profitability, PBT grew by 11.3%, with a 5-year CAGR of 12%, and we anticipate that PBT will even grow at a higher rate, considering KCB strengthening its digital platform. NMI grew by 14.6%, with a 5-year CAGR of 9.8%, as EPS grew by 16.7%. Key ratios, loan-to-deposit ratio, grew at 8% in 2015. KCB is still struggling with a high cost-to-income ratio that is still above 45%. Now, KCB has employed strategies to reduce the ratio, but we find this ratio still high for KCB. However, it boasts of a high return on equity, averaging at 24.5%, and a return on assets averaging at 3.8%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Crescent. So about KCB's valuation, we use the dividend discount model, the residual income model, and the net asset value model. When we averaged the prices from these different valuation models, we came up with a 1-year target price of 43.55 Kenya shillings and a hold recommendation. So under the dividend discount model, our primary assumptions were the growth rate of 10%, a weighted average cost of capital of 13.6%, a cost of equity of 18.6%, and a beta of 0.8. As we can see on the graph, KCB has stable profitability shown by the 8-year CAGR of 13.72% on the profit before tax, which shows that the earnings are expected to increase over the years. We also carried out a sensitivity analysis on the DDM model, and we saw that at the lowest projected growth rate of 7% and at the highest cost of equity of 13.6%, we have a share value of 32.42 Kenya shillings, which is close to the 61 share value in Kenya shillings we derived at using the DDM model. Moving on to the residual income, we were able to, based on primary assumptions, of a cost of equity of 18.6% and a growth rate of 10%, and we arrived at a share value of 43.16 Kenya shillings. We see that the positive and increasing residual income of KCB as a group is a sign that it's creating value for its shareholders. We moved on to the net asset value analysis, and we were able to derive a share value of 26.5 Kenya shillings. As we can see, it is less than the closing price of 28.75 Kenya shillings as at the end of 2016. All in all, we see that the 11.25 Kenya shilling decline is a sign that KCB should keep a hold.
Thank you. Looking at KCB risk management, we evaluated the risks depending on their impact and likelihood. Because looking at the major risks, over-dependency risk, KCB Group highly depends on KCB Kenya as it contributes 86% of its revenue. In case of any shock on KCB Kenya, it will highly affect its performance. For example, the upcoming Kenya political elections. Macroeconomic risk. Our macroeconomic environment is highly unstable, and thus uncertainty of the shilling and also uncertainty about our earnings. However, KCB is currently implementing Basel III, which will help KCB absorb any shocks. Regulatory risk. CBK has introduced the Banking Amendment Act cap on interest rate, which limits interest earnings. KCB is compliant with this regulation. The credit risk. KCB NPL ratios have increased from 6.9. In conclusion, we recommend a hold. despite the strong brand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You said NPLs of KCB have it's a big problem for them. So why do you think they are high, and what do you think can be done to bring them down?
One, I will point out that in the entire economy, because we are looking at the East African region, there is slow business and businesses are not performing. So people who get loans fail to pay, and citing high interest rates in other countries. I'll give an example of Uganda. The rate almost at 23%. That's too high. And because businesses are slow, people get money, businesses are not working out, people find it hard to recover and pay the loans. Now, what could be done about the high NPLs? One, KCB has to increase the credit rating system. Before you give out your loans to your customers, then you should find ways of assessing, is this person going to be able to pay? So if they could find means of, putting ways and find ways of how to assess their customers before they give out the loans. And then I also hope and believe that since for Kenya, the CBK has introduced a cap that is certainly going to be of an advantage at a point to the customers, then I hope people will be able to pay back the loans, because the rates are now high. Probably they are going to be low for customers to handle. Thank you.
Why are you recommending a hold? Very briefly, given the fact that the price is at 28, your valuation is at 44.
Well, recommending a hold, we took a 1-year target, and expecting that in the 1-year target we have quite variables that are stressing the economy. We have the political tension arising from Kenya and Rwanda, where elections are coming up. We have Burundi and Southern Sudan that are recovering from hyperinflation. The price target of 43.55 would be realistic and achievable given settled stress factors. But with those factors in play, they are likely to bring our valuation to a hold.
Yeah, we also see that business in Uganda is still just coming back after the previous elections. And then the reputation of KCB has been tainted by URA striking off KCB from its tax portal. So we realize that as business is starting to regain in Uganda and also Burundi after the chaos that was there, we see that right now shareholders should hold.
Okay, don't answer. There's just a comment on that. It seems that you're not very confident with your valuation, or you didn't factor in those risks in terms of your projections for the numbers for 2017, and therefore they are not factored in the valuation. There's still a lot of work that needs to go into it before you have a final number. That's just a comment. I think my final question is on, you mentioned that the penetration in banking, is it in Kenya? You said is low compared to other African countries. Do you have data to support that? You can be able to demonstrate for us the various penetration levels in Africa?
The one with competitor and ownership banks, we have that, using the Lanex index, we have that competition in East Africa is rated at 0.16. Competition in West Africa is rated at 0.34, whereas that of Northern Africa is rated at 0.35, and that of Southern Africa rated at 0.33. So we looked at that as the competition being low, the innovation, this side we have the innovation of the banking sector compared to other region blocks being quite low. We found that the banks are struggling. If they're not, they're struggling to get to the customers, to reach their products with them. So that's why the penetration is quite high for banks.
Just following up from Steve's question, I think you're looking at East Africa as a whole, but Kenya, banking in Kenya, I think is a lot different from the rest of East Africa. And I think you should try to break that down, because if you presented me those figures, I wouldn't accept that. Because KCB is 86% of KCB's revenue is from Kenya. So I would prefer a Kenyan comparison to the rest of Africa. But that's just a comment, unless you have an answer to that.
It's not necessarily an answer, but we try to look at regions in terms of the people or the population having access to financial institution, and the financial inclusion is very, 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 very low.
I accept that, but at the moment we're looking at KCB. We're not looking at a region. Yeah, we're looking at whether we should invest or not in KCB, and then diluting it with what's happening in the region is not helping your case. Anyway, let's leave that aside. My question was, can I look at? Do you have a slide on what the dividend payout per share has been for the last 4 or 5 years from KCB? Okay, so over the last 4 years, dividends have increased from 1.9 shillings per share to 2.2 shillings per share, yes?
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Well, I calculated that to be, you said it's only 3.7% growth rate. But when we look at your dividend discount model, I noticed that you seem to be extrapolating dividend growth at 10%. And yet, evidence shows it's only been just under 4% for the last 4 years.
Now, in 2015, dividend DPS stood at 2.0. However, going on in 2016, we had anticipated that DPS will increase to 2.2, which is a 10% increment. So we are assumed that as our growth rate going forward for the DPS.
Based on 1 year's growth rate?
Yes.
For the next... To infinity, 10% to infinity. How do you justify that?
Well...
So about the cost, because we're basing on, as I said, the 2015 to 2016 estimates, and we got a growth rate of 10%. But in our projections, which as you can see, from 2016 onwards, we were basing on an increase in perpetuity, but by 10%, given we had already had about the proposed increment in the dividend in the coming AGM to 3 dividends per share. So that's what we mostly based on when we're getting our growth rate.
I know what you've based it on, but how do you justify it? I mean, looking forward, do you really see a 10% growth rate every year?
Yeah, okay, yes. We're justifying given the assumptions from the investor presentation about increasing the dividend per share to 2 shillings.
And what do you expect the income to grow at going forward? So dividends are growing at 10%, and what about the net profits?
Now, we looked at our PBT, profit before tax, and we are anticipating that PBT will be growing at 14.3%, but that is as of 2016, going in 2016. So 10% growth in DPS, quite justifiable to us.
And the growth in net profit?
Well, we didn't look at the growth in net profit.
Okay, you have assumptions in your model going forward for net profit? I mean, the dividends will have to be paid out of the net profit. So it has to be sustainable.
And one more thing why I would think dividends are sustainable for KCB, well, it has had gradual increase in their revenues, so we don't expect serious shocks for KCB to reach at the point where they will not be able to to pay back to their shareholders.
Okay. There is disconnect. This is also just a comment between what you're saying, the numbers, and what you're saying when you're presenting. Because when you're presenting, you're talking about all these challenges, about the interest rate, about the economy, about all these challenges that KCB has, and then the numbers that you put into your model are...
Well, okay, yes, the numbers look okay on paper, But based on the economic conditions coming up, like the forthcoming elections, we've seen economies basically in East Africa not doing that good. So we were recommending a hold, even if what shows on the numbers look okay. We anticipate they won't exactly. We don't want to ascertain that they'll appreciate, that the share value will appreciate with time. And we can also, based on the previous sale of 2016, we saw that at the beginning the share price was at 40, and closing it was at 28, which was a 11.25 Kenya shilling decline. And right now, into 2017, it has already declined to 24.25 Kenya shillings from 28.75.
Okay. Unfortunately,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.